Welcome to Saving Europe. I'm the novelist and historian Henry Viner Brooks, and in this series we're following the lives and travels of two of history's unsung heroes. The decisive leadership shown by the 6th century monk Columbanus and the 20th century statesman Robert Schuman helped rescue Western civilization in two very different dark ages. So, joined by my two sons, I'm on a 4,000-mile, 12-country post-Brexit odyssey to find out if these men and these dark ages can teach us anything for today. In this episode, we'll cross the Alps into Italy.
The way that Columbanus came. Beautiful plateau.
We will sniff out almost forgotten locations associated with Columbanus.
We'll meet an amazing thought leader who helped the Latin West adjust to the New World Order.
And finally arrive in Lombardy to meet another remarkable Dark Age queen.
A very extraordinary woman called Theodolinda.
Where it turns out that Columbanus has something she needs. So, at the cathedral she built, we'll also sample Columbanus' literary legacy before heading further south. If you're finding this content helpful, then please return the favour by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and perhaps even sharing it with a friend. And also do check out the new book which accompanies this series. Thanks for watching.
This is the way that Columbanus came. Beautiful plateau. The highest point just behind me at the Lucmagna pass, on the other side Descentis. It is a glorious place. I imagine the day he came, he had other things on his mind than the view. He'd left behind some good friends and now was a man in his 70s heading down. And I don't know what must it have been like for someone from almost the flatlands of County Carlo coming over here. It must have been awesome. We're looking up there as we cross now into Lombardy. We're looking up at the at a glacier. So anyway, we're heading down. Columbanus is remembered just down here at a little village called Olivone, where there is still a chapel that commemorates him, which is old.
But before descending from the proverbial mountain to the plain, that is, dare I say, the relative stability of Merovingian Gaul to the smash and grab mayhem of 5th and 6th century Italy, I'd like you to meet one more far-sighted European thought leader who helped save the Latin West in one of its darkest hours. He was a wealthy Roman patrician, successful businessman and politician who gave it all up to become a lowly monk, but then was elevated against his will and inclination to a position of cultural influence where he was able to mediate between the beleaguered old stock Europeans and the invading migrant hordes, and he became the essential link between the imperial Roman system and the medieval synthesis. And the best place to meet him is at his family home on the Celian Hill in Rome.
It's extraordinary to be cycling on top of the Circus Maximus. Used to hold, I think, 380,000 people. Over 1/3 people gather here to watch charioteers whizzing round. Up there is the Palatine, the Emperor's Palace. Huge complex. I'm on my way up there, the Celian Hill. Here on the Celian Hill was where Gregory was from, one of the great heroes of the Christian story. At a time when Rome was in a state of disarray, it was not protected as well as places like Alexandria and Antioch, the great centres of Christianity. No one could suspect at that point that they would fall. They'd soon be gone, fallen to the Muslims. It was just such a time that we were away from the privileges of imperial power and able to survive, and Gregory was one of the people that actually made that possible. And he grew up here at this place. You can see this tower and this church. This was his old family home, and he turned it into a monastery, entered as a brother, and did plenty of writing, a lot of Bible study. His regular pastoralist was very popular, read by Columbanus, and Columbanus writes to him and pleads for him, send me some more stuff. That commentary on Ezekiel, let's have more like that. So a man given the almost contradictory titles of Magnus, which means great, and Saint. So it kind of tells you what an interesting guy he must have been. He says he looks back on his time here as a monk as actually one of the happiest of his life, that he practiced such austerities that it actually impaired his health. He had a kind of a sickly pallor to his skin. I've chosen this little bit to sit at because these stones were well known to Gregory. His family was rich, but it was also pious. He lived through the sufferings of 2 Gothic sieges, the first when he was only 5 years old. The city had become depopulated and partly ruined. He later called Rome a rotten old ship. He was called to be an urban prefect when only 30, and would travel in a chariot drawn by 4 white horses. From this office he later resigned, founding 6 monasteries on his Sicilian estates and another at his family villa here on the Celian Hill. And he entered this monastery not as an abbot but as a lowly brother. This might seem like fanatical behaviour until we remember that Gregory, along with many others, imminently expected the end of the world. Looking back years later, he lamented about being, quote, splattered with the world's dust, and now I am tossed, he said, by the billows of a mighty sea, and the ship of my soul is dashed by the storms of a great tempest. And when I remember the state of my life, I sigh as one who, looking back, beholds the haven he has left. He meant this place. He became Bishop of Rome at a time when its importance had sunk and where the whole world looked east to Byzantium for protection. Imperial civilization and even theological acuity were found in the east. They weren't found in Rome. It is easy to forget that in the 6th century it was inconceivable that the great Christian centres of Alexandria and Antioch in the east would soon fall into the hands of infidels. At this crucial moment in history, the papacy's theology was free from compromise with imperial power or the ecclesiastical rivalries of Alexandria. In fact, when Constantine II came here, he was odious to the Romans because all he did is he came and stripped all the statues in place of metal to make coinage and to make weapons. But there wasn't a lot of truck between the 2 places, and when they wanted help to withstand Gothic sieges, they didn't get much from Constantinople. Deserted by the civil administration, Gregory's Rome still possessed the great Roman name, and in many ways he and other popes were able to use this mystique to save the city from barbarian despoliation. The barbarians had been taught to revere the Roman name, and that fame became a most valuable currency in a rapidly disintegrating world. If Constantinople could not be relied upon, then the West must turn to what little resources it had left. Gregory was a man of the hour. He understood that this world order had to be faced up to. The barbarians were here to stay, and in the end it was the church rather than Justinian that was able to become the unifying force between the Romans and the barbarian invaders. If they could not be Romanized, then at least they might be Christianized. Gregory made peace with the Lombards in order to save Rome from being sacked, and then set about the conversion of the heathen. And you can still stand on that sloping courtyard, I'm sitting at the bottom of it, from where Augustine of Canterbury left on his mission to convert southern Britain. When Columban wrote to Gregory, he called him the fairest ornament and most honoured flower, as it were, of a worn-down Europe. He said that Gregory's regular pastoralis was sweeter than honey to the needy. It's extraordinary. If you read his life of Benedict, it's pretty sugary as far as hagiographies go. Not one of my favourites at all, but considering the resources he had for the time, he did extraordinary things, and he deserves our great respect indeed. So we don't know whether he wrote back to Columbanus, but nevertheless, Gregory, great man.
Gregory died in 604, and 8 years later Columbanus is descending the Alps into the territory of those same Lombards with whom Gregory made peace. So we rejoin the Irish band at the Lucmagna Pass, or as we should say now, we're in Italy, the Passo del Lucmagno, to see whether we can find any traces of his time in this area.
Some of it, is very reminiscent of Scotland. This could be the Enoclinic Ridge on the north of Glencoe, until you remember that we're already nearly 2,000 feet higher than the Scottish Munros. We're pretty sure this is where he came down because of leaving one of his disciples at Disentis, and this being the next place where there is a church dedication, which I've no idea where it is. So it's part of our exploration to find this little church dedicated to Saint Columban, which we reckon must mark the route that he came. It's not the San Bernardino route, it's not the Saint Gothard route, it's an unusual one, but we're going to find it, God willing. We're there in 2 minutes. You cannot help but get shivers when you see. Just look at it. We live among mountains in England, but this separates the men from the boys. I mean, this is like straight up, maybe. I've just been to this hotel. That lady didn't know. The lady sitting outside smoking didn't know. The restaurant owner didn't know. The restaurant staff didn't know. But there were a collection, there they are, film those guys over there. These old boys coming out of the thing with wonderful faces. They knew. So Columban came down this hill, here's Olivone. The old guy said, it's just 200 meters down the hill on the left, I think is what they said. So let's just keep our eyes peeled. Look at those mountains, they just go up into the sky. Look at the view. How high they are. Right, keep your eyes peeled. 200 meters in stride, but we're not seeing it. 200 meters, oh, we've passed 200 meters now. I'll hook a left off here and then I'll go up into that little estate there. Then we go around a corner. All the stuff that's not being secured goes everywhere. Look at that fantastic house there. Such a different way of life living in these Alps. Little tractors all geared to go up really steep things. Ah, here's a chapel or something. Oh, wow. And so, after crossing the great mountain pass over from Disentis into what we now call Switzerland, Columbanus came into Lombardy. This church is really 18th century, but it's built on a 12th century church, which is itself built on an even earlier foundation. In other words, the memory of this man of God coming here was still latent in this part of what is now Switzerland. Of course, it wasn't Switzerland then. He was entering into the territory of the Lombards. And this is where he was going, down. As he comes down into Lombardy, Columbanus is now minus his soul friend. He's also minus 3 other monks, Ursinius and Dicol, Comgal. But he has enough to do what he has to do next, and that is do his final monastery at Bobbio, a gift from the king and queen of this area of Lombardy. Some very interesting people, Theodelinda and Agilulf of the Lombards. And that's where we're heading next to see what they built at Monza, outside Milan.
You risked all your lives for me. I cannot repay all that you've done until this day. 'Cause I feel just like a firebrand tonight. Blood from the flames of certain death. I was precious in your sight, and I want you to know this firebrand is burning hot tonight. I just want to say thank you. I want to thank you both for looking after me. When you saw that I got my milk and my meat and the mandarin that I needed, what can I say to you? You sustain this life in me. How can I repay all that you've done until this day? 'Cause sometimes I still feel like a firebrand tonight, where the ones I loved died in the dark, and I got out alright. What purpose did God have to choose someone too weak to fight? I wanna say, use me, Lord, use me.
When Columbanus came over the Alps, he landed in the court of Agilulf and Theodelinda, and there's only one place to meet them and really see their work, and it's in the church, or the cathedral that they commissioned here at Monza. We're in the cloister at the side of the Cathedral of Monza. This was originally commissioned in the 7th century by a very extraordinary woman called Theodelinda. She was the daughter of the King of Bavaria, and when her first husband Arthuri died, she was able to select her own second husband. It fell to her own power, whether that was by some prenuptial contract, I don't know. She chose Agilulf, and he turned out to be a good sort of egg. He was raised on the shield, so the historian tells us, in 592. When this was completed, just 10 years before Columbanus arrived in Italy, the queen had the joy of having her husband Agilulf baptized along with her firstborn son, both together. This is a later construction over the top of the original basilica, and it's very impressive. Many of the treasures, like her crown, are housed in the museum just round the side.
Along with the famous Lombard Iron Crown, this museum is a rare glimpse into that New World Order that arose after the decline of Rome. These artifacts highlight for me the complexity of our cultural DNA, that we Europeans seem to be, for better or worse, that special blend of the secular Roman, the Christian saint, and the marauding barbarian. The gilt bronze forehead plate of Agilulf's helmet, now in the Bargello Museum in Florence, depicts his coronation. Chosen from among his peers by this widowed queen without a child, he had landed on his feet, and his 26-year reign was largely a success. And by choosing a fitting husband and securing the succession, Theodelinda had achieved what our Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots could not. But she had even more on her mind than just securing the borders and the dynastic succession. The Queen was also on a mission to persuade northern Italy to renounce the Arian heresy. Arianism was a widespread pseudo-Christian religion and very popular among the invading tribes who, much like the Jehovah's Witnesses today, did not acknowledge the simultaneous divinity and humanity of Jesus. Theodelinda had managed to win her husband to the Nicene Christian faith, but winning North Italy was another matter entirely. For that, she needed a champion, a polemicist, a theologian. In short, for that, she needed a man like Columbanus.
Because Columbanus lands on his feet at just the right moment. Let me read to you how Jonas puts it. Then Columbanus, he left Gaul and Germany, and he went to Italy. And there he was received with honour by Agilulf, king of the Lombards. The latter granted him the privilege of settling in Italy, wherever he pleased, and he did so. And during his stay in Milan, he resolved to attack the errors of the heretics, that is, the Arian perfidy, which he wanted to cut out and to exterminate with the cauterizing knife of the scriptures. And he composed an excellent and learned work against them, Jonas of Bobbio. These writings are lost, but others of this period from his life still survive. His sermons from this period also survive. So too his letter to Pope Boniface, which he wrote at the king's request on another controversy called the Three Chapters. In it he appeals with passion as a foolish Scot from De Finibus Extremis, from the world's end, for the Pope to refute the heresy and to show leadership on the issue. The letter runs to 5,000 words, and Columban makes use of alliteration, idiomatic expression, assonance, prolonged metaphors, parallel phrases, proverbs and puns. Columban shows sincerity, vigour and a strength of expression which borders on pugnacity. Another poem, one to Fidolius, is also likely the production of this period while he's here. GSM Walker believes they are the crown of Columban's achievement in literary terms, even claiming that Latin verses of this quality had seldom been written for 500 years, and it seemed almost that Horace sang again by the lips of an Irish exile in the Po Valley. The comparison bears out, not least because, along with Virgil and Ovid, Columban uses many metaphors straight from Horace's odes. While others have strained to inherit the Roman laurels, Columbanus won them inadvertently while trying to warn a friend of the dangers of riches. The sparse couplets do not translate well from the Latin, but I give a few of the 150 plus lines below. I ask no rich gifts that will not endure, gold that the miser hoards up yet is poor. It blinds wise men's eyes, and just like the dart of a fire it consumes the reprobate heart. Christ be your portion, Lord of creation, God's the Almighty's one generation. I really think that Columbanus felt that he had come home. Here he was welcomed by kings, gone with the old troubles with Theodoric up in the north and Brunhilde. What an extraordinary place to come. What an extraordinary family. She's remembered here on street signs, and there are roundels of her. I've got some lovely pictures. Here is her crown, and that's in the museum actually, just behind us. And these are the frescoes from inside the cathedral. That's her guest at her wedding banquet. That's her, I think. There she is taking the chalice at her wedding nuptials. She's a bonny lass, blonde. She was the daughter of Garibaldi I of Bavaria. How they were wanting to look like they were true heirs of Rome. Of course they weren't. The Lombards were mercenaries in the pay of the Eastern Emperor who decided to settle in North Italy. It's lovely to see these streets come alive in the evenings. I imagine that sitting in cafes was very far from Columbanus's mind. He still had one great work left to do, and that was to found another monastery. And he asks for a grant of land, and the charter still exists, that he was given 4 miles up the Trebbia Valley, quite a few days' journey from here up, and that's where we're going to go next.
But on his way south to that valley that Hemingway would later call the loveliest in the world, Columbanus must have passed through the ancient city of Pavia. And so that is where we must follow too. And in Pavia, at the tombs of Boethius, Augustine and the Ostrogoth kings, oh my goodness, we come closer still to that generation who not only survived the collapse of Roman civilization, but also preserved the lamp of faith and learning for the generation that would follow. So it's Pavia, next time on Saving Europe. Remember also that this journey was part of the research for a book which uses the lives of Columbanus and Schuman
to explore the unlikely arrival, survival, victory and atrophy of European civilization.
Do follow the links below to find out more.
Please let us know what you thought of this episode, what you liked, what you didn't, what was new to you. Just start a conversation below in the comments section. And of course, if you found the content helpful, then we're pretty sure you're going to like this next one suggested here. But also while you're there, don't forget to help us by subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.